One key factor in the literature and in comments from men is the perspective towards aggression. Aggression is developed in childhood. There are two types and three forms. So there is proactive aggression. Children act to fulfill a need or desire, obtain an object, privilege, space, attack a person unemotionally to achieve their goal. Reactive aggression. This is an angry, defensive response to provocation or a blocked goal. So you may, if the goal for, say, a toxic woman is to get out of her current financial, situation, which she doesn't have a job, her own place to live, or anything like that, then you become that object that she's going to obtain. And it's more women doing that than men, because if it's a high status man, he doesn't look at a high status woman and says, I need to obtain her. For him, it is up to her to come to him and obtain him, right? So if the desire is to move out of one economic station into another, and instead of moving out using a job and education, you decide that you want to pursue a wealthy man, a rich man, then that becomes your objective. That becomes almost like your dream. And then you will use any of your own personal sexual gifts and talents to secure that relationship. That is proactive aggression, right? Reactive aggression, this is an angry, defensive response to provocation or a blocked goal. So then you are in the relationship and you want the person to buy you everything you want, right? And even with a wealthy man, a high status man, he still has limits. He still, sets boundaries. Even if a wealthy man will have like a whole car collection, that's an investment. He sees that as an investment, right? But you won't see him just spending money without purpose. So then here you come along, you got the objective, you have achieved the objective to have him, right? Then he follows it up by marrying you, and then you want to do more things like a child, right? Because you're still in your child type of mentality, and then he gets angry and defensive, right? You are kind of provoking him. Why can't I have this? I should be able to have this. He's blocking the goal that you have to have everything you want through him. And so you are essentially provoking him, right? And by default, you think he is provoking you because he won't give you everything you want. So that's reactive aggression. Both proactive aggression and reactive aggression are expressed in these three forms. So physical, verbal, and relational. So physical, where you harm to others through physical injury, including pushing, hitting, kicking, punching others. Verbal, harm to others through threats of physical aggression, name calling, hostile, teasing. And then relational, that's the damage to peer relationships via social exclusion, gossip, and manipulation. So how many times do we see this now? We see in adulthood our childhood representations of activities that we did when we were children and adolescents, that we are still children on the playground, and that if we don't get our way in a situation, we're going to hit and kick and punch. If you see a man continually hitting a woman, there is something in that man that is still childlike, that makes him think that he still has to pursue that course of action in order to accomplish his goals. If you see a woman verbally name calling, hostile, teasing, being condescending, there is still something in her from childhood that makes her feel like she has to pursue that course of action. Have you ever watched that show, 600-pound person or whatever? When that person is, trying to lose weight and get better, and they are 600 pounds and they're going down to about 400, and everyone has to kind of come together and carry that person and help that person and things like that. And I venture to say that coming around and helping that person in that way really began much earlier than before that person got to 600 pounds. They were just the type of person that you had to sort of stop everything you were doing in order to see if they were okay. Well, I was watching an episode a couple of days ago, and the lady is married, and the man helps her. He's not 600 pounds. She is. And I don't know what was going on in the relationship, but he had just helped her through the room. He had done so much, to get her into the hotel, because they were going to go to Houston to see Dr. Now. And he had done so much in that moment, changed the rooms, right? They were in one room and the bed wasn't big enough, and then they changed the rooms, and then he had to help her all over again, and she was like 800 pounds. And I heard her call him asshole. Now, I don't know what he did or said, because the cameras, didn't catch that part. I don't know. But the fact that that person just helped you in that kind of way and has been with you all these years as a husband or as a wife, and you can just call that person an asshole, that is telling to me. That is so horrible. And what that basically tells me is that she's been using those types of name calling and hostile teasing to keep him on the hook, because she can't really give him sex. She's too big to kind of give him sex. So she got to keep him on the hook some kind of way. And so she's using verbal aggression to accomplish her goal. And then relational aggression, that damage to peer relationships via social exclusion, gossip, and manipulation. I never did well in groups, in peer groups. I did have friends in, K through 12, but I never did well in friend groups, because somehow they could perceive that in some ways I was the weaker link, but they could also perceive that I was the person that they couldn't, fully manipulate, that I could take you or leave you too in that situation. But I never did well in groups, simply because of relational aggression. Although physical aggression and verbal aggression are obvious, it is relational aggression that is more subtle. It is best expressed in statements children make to their peers. Do what I say or I won't be your friend. This statement in childhood best epitomizes adult manipulation in relationships today. It is the best representation of an ultimatum women give. Well, you can say the same also about men. Women use this type of, ultimatum. I mean, if you don't buy me this thing, then I'm leaving. Or if you don't want to do this, that's fine. I can get my daddy to do it. That type of manipulation. But you can say the same in a man, cheating outside of the relationship. Do what I say. Do what I believe. Accept what I believe. I think cheating is necessary. Right? So accept what I believe. And if you don't, I won't come back and have sex with you. I won't come back and be your friend in that kind of way. I won't come back and go to the movies with you. In other words, I won't come back and have be in relationship with you. And if you've ever sort of struggled in, something like that, where you have been abandoned in your lifespan, it's really hard to give up that type of person. Not because you don't always love yourself, but because, you haven't addressed those types of abandonment issues. It reflects negative impulsivity and issues with social skills. When one makes that statement, the person bypasses social development and moves into antisocial activity. So, according to these authors here, children who are emotionally negative, impulsive, and disobedient are prone to early high rates of physical or relational aggression, or both, that often persist, placing them at risk for internalizing and externalizing difficulties, social skills deficits, and antisocial activity in middle childhood and adolescence. This creates a distorted view. So if you have to be negative and controlling, impulsive, disobedient, exercising physical, verbal, and relational aggression, you truly do have a distorted view, not only of relationships in adulthood, you have a distorted view of the world. That you will see the person carry out these types of activities in business, in other types of relationships, because they believe that the only way to have you is to control you. The only way to navigate life is to, disobey, not adhere, not respect. The only way to get you to do whatever it is they want you to do is to hit you, is to name call you, is to socially isolate. And you see people often do this in adulthood. So that means it's so much that is not resolved from childhood. This distorted view has its roots in the family dynamic, which serves as a training ground for how we relate to other people. If a home is conflict-ridden at childhood and adolescence, and the individual does not reflect and move to heal wounds, then it is arguable that an individual will attempt to replicate conflict in marriage and in friendships. Parents try to be forceful in their relationships with their children, punishing bad behavior, but they also threaten and give in. There is no stability. I think that, second bullet point is probably the most important. If a home is conflict-ridden at childhood and adolescence, and the individual does not reflect and move to heal wounds, then it is arguable that an individual will attempt to replicate conflict in marriage and in friendships. There are some people, they just cannot live outside of conflict. They just refuse. Now, it could be in part because of their childhood, that the only way that the parent was able to get anything done or get the children to do anything was to create sort of like a chaotic, conflict-ridden, I'm going to beat you if you don't do it, I'm going to whoop you, right? Or to create a situation where the children are, sort of pitted against each other, right? You have those types of homes where the father will pit child against child, the mother will pit child against child, right? Then people will often replicate that type of conflict in their marriage and in friendships. You'll see if they come from a home where the parents pit the children against each other, or the parents pit the children against another parent, you'll see that woman or that man leave that childhood family dynamic and move those types of strategies into her relationships, into her marriage. And And the funny thing is, she don't understand why her mate, her partner, doesn't just comply. He doesn't want to comply to that kind of manipulation, or she doesn't want to comply to that kind of manipulation. It worked in her family dynamic. Otherwise, she would not be, bringing it into her marriage and friendships. But she can't understand why, when she tries to do it with friends and marriage, her partner, that it doesn't work with those types of people, right? That they leave her, and she can't understand it, or he can't understand it. Because like I said in the previous slides, that there are some people that pouting and tantrums will not work with. And replicating conflict is really no different than pouting, falling out on the floor, and giving a tantrum. This lack of stability in perception of relationships is spread to peer relationships. Lack of stability affects the capacity for emotional self-regulation and guilt after committing a transgression. When there is destructive sibling conflict, this too contributes to poor self-control and antisocial behavior. This results in the rejection of highly aggressive children by a peer. So, just like I said, even people on the playground, there were some people that a bully could not bully. And you see that now in adulthood, that there are some people that an adult bully cannot bully, that they're just not going to take it. They don't even have to fight with you. They know how to walk away. They know how to not deal with you. If you have to give somebody an ultimatum, and we talked about that for, if I can remember, part 1, under this reason number 6, that some ultimatums do not work with people who are not the marrying kind. And then even if they are the marrying kind, I would just add that some ultimatums do not work with those people. They don't want to be controlled. That it's like you having the use of an ultimatum is like you having your foot on their neck, and they don't want to live and reside and house under your neck. Under your foot. Treatment for aggression at the child and adolescent levels is available, but it must begin early. At the adult level, without therapy and or personal reflection, it is difficult to change. Interventions that focus on resolving distorted views and modifying aggression is effective for developing conflict resolution skills. So I think oftentimes where there is conflict is when we don't always consider the perspective of others, or consider the idea that people have perspective, that they have a viewpoint. When we already have our own viewpoint, we've already made up our minds, conflict ensues because the person wants to be able to voice their opinion, and you are trying to silence their voice by not taking into consideration their opinion. Conflict resolution also includes promoting empathy, sympathetic concern. Where we go wrong as adults is that we might have been in the same situation the person is going through now, but we feel like we have, gotten past that, and now instead of responding to someone who is struggling with the situation, we criticize them. And in a strange sense, we may be really criticizing ourselves for being in that situation in the past. But the person needs you now. And I'm not saying you need to give all of your empathy and all of your sympathy to every time a person comes along, because a lot of times those people could be victim, have a victimhood mentality as well. But that's where we kind of struggle. That's where conflict can come in, because you're not understanding the pain. The same pain that they are going through is the same pain you just got out of. And then learn to cope with stressors. So You might hear people who struggle with drugs, or any type of abusive situation, psychological abusive situation, to know your triggers, right? That a certain type of person, for me now, that I realize after writing the books and developing this lecture series, that a person who doesn't want anything, has no aim, just wants to use me, is a trigger. They just want sex, right? They are hunting for sex, but not hunting for commitment, and that they will abandon me at the right turn, when the right person comes along, right? That's a stressor. That's a trigger for me. So now I have to know not to give in to those types of people, because that same type of person I have been dealing with from the time I was young all the way to adulthood, and I didn't know it. And I had been sleepwalking the whole time. So you have to know what your stressors are. I cannot have a roommate situation anymore. I have done a roommate situation before, and I can't control the situation. I can't control the house. I don't like people in the house. I don't know who you are. And so when you have a roommate situation, you have to take into consideration their likes and dislikes, and you have to be polite. And at 44 years old, I don't want to be polite. When I come into the house, I want to come into the house. I want to chunk my clothes, put on some food to cook, watch some TV, work on some more chapters of my book or something like that. And I don't want to have to be polite. That's why I don't necessarily entertain. And so sometimes you will have a roommate situation where they love people at the house. They just love, like they have to have a whole crowd of people. I'm not one of those types of people. And then receive counseling where necessary. So some people just don't value the importance of counseling, right? Now the counselor can't save you, but they can give you some tools and tips, right, to navigate your life and reflect and assess on those areas that have sort of brought you stress.